Hello everyone, I'm really glad you're here. Tonight, I want to help you let go of the day and ease into rest. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and it means a lot to be part of your nightly routine. So, if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin the first story. Sarah seemed perfect when I first matched with her on the dating app. Her photos showed a beautiful, down-to-earth woman with an infectious smile. We had been chatting for about a month, exchanging messages daily. She was funny, intelligent, and according to her social media profiles, single. After my previous relationship had ended badly, discovering my ex-girlfriend was married with 3 children, I was cautious but hopeful. When my friends invited me to Palm Springs for a birthday celebration, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to finally meet Sarah in person. The city was only 30 minutes from her home, making it convenient for both of us. The bar they had chosen featured a live band and dancing, an ideal setting for a first date. I arrived at 9 in the evening, greeting my friends who were already enjoying the festivities. Sarah had agreed to meet me at 11 o'clock sharp. As the appointed time approached, I positioned myself near the entrance, heart racing with anticipation. When the door opened, I saw Sarah walking through, but she wasn't alone. She was pushing an elderly man in a wheelchair. The man appeared frail and sickly, his face gaunt and pale. He wore a serious expression that never seemed to change throughout the evening. Sarah greeted me with a warm hug and casually mentioned that she hoped I didn't mind her bringing her father along. She explained that he was ill and had recently returned from a trip to Haiti. This was the first time she had mentioned having a sick father. In fact, just the week before, she had told me her father was traveling and that they were planning to have dinner together. I smiled politely and assured her it was no problem, introducing both Sarah and her father to my birthday friend. Despite my efforts to include him in conversations, the elderly man remained completely silent. He would stare blankly at whoever was speaking, never offering so much as a nod or smile in response. His presence cast an odd shadow over what should have been a joyful evening. After a couple of hours, Sarah announced that they needed to leave. They departed in a van, and I texted her afterward, expressing hope that her father had enjoyed himself and wishing him well. Her response came an hour later with a simple thanks, nothing more. The brevity of her reply left me wondering if she hadn't enjoyed our time together, or if she was simply preoccupied with caring for her father. Around 3 in the morning, my friends and I decided to continue the celebration at my friend's sister's house, which was conveniently located just 5 minutes away. We settled into the living room with drinks and music, the curtains open to provide a view of the quiet street outside. As we talked and laughed, my friend Jimmy suddenly pointed toward the window. "Isn't that your date's father?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. I looked up and felt a chill run down my spine. There, rolling slowly down the empty street, was the same elderly man in his wheelchair. He appeared to be alone, moving with purpose despite the late hour. How could he possibly be out here by himself? The questions multiplied in my mind. Where was Sarah? Why would she leave her sick father to wander the streets alone? I considered texting her, but decided against it, unsure of what I would even say. We eventually settled in for the night, sleeping in the living room. When morning came around 7, I walked to my car to meet the others for breakfast at a nearby restaurant. As I drove the short distance, I spotted the wheelchair-bound man again, He was sitting motionless beside a tree on the sidewalk, as if he had been waiting there all night. Concerned for his well-being, I immediately called Sarah, but received no answer. I turned my car around, intending to check on the man and offer assistance, but when I looked back, he had vanished. The sidewalk was empty, as if he had never been there at all. During breakfast, my worry for Sarah grew. I decided to browse through her social media profiles, hoping to find some explanation for the previous night's strange events. As I scrolled through her photos, I came across a recent picture that made my blood run cold. It showed Sarah and her mother having dinner with her father after his supposed trip. The man in the photograph was completely different from the person I had met. He appeared healthy, robust, and at least 20 years younger than the frail figure in the wheelchair. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Why would Sarah lie about something so elaborate? Who was the man in the wheelchair, and what was his connection to her? My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. The text contained only 4 words that would haunt me for years to come. Daddy didn't like you. Before I could respond, I discovered that she had blocked me on all platforms. I never heard from Sarah again, and I never learned the true identity of the mysterious man in the wheelchair. The experience left me questioning everything I thought I knew about online dating and the people we meet through digital connections. Let's dive into the next disturbing story. At 22, I was finally living independently for the first time. I had my own apartment, a reliable car, and a steady job. The only thing missing from my new adult life was a meaningful relationship. After years of focusing on school and family obligations, I was ready to find someone special to share my experiences with. I downloaded the dating app with modest expectations, spending my free time swiping through profiles of women in my area. While I had a few matches, most conversations fizzled out quickly. Then one day, I encountered a profile that stopped me in my tracks. The woman was stunningly beautiful, so much so that I initially doubted the profile was real. To my amazement, we matched immediately. Her name was Jessica, and over the next 2 days, we spent every free moment chatting online. Our conversations flowed naturally, covering everything from our career aspirations to our favorite movies. She had a quick wit and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. When I finally worked up the courage to ask her on a date, I braced myself for rejection. Instead, her response exceeded my wildest expectations. Rather than suggesting we meet at a restaurant or coffee shop, she sent a message with a winking emoji. "Why don't you just come over?" My heart raced as I typed back, offering my address and suggesting she visit me instead. She agreed to come over the following evening at 9 o'clock. I spent the entire day preparing, cleaning my apartment thoroughly, and planning a home-cooked meal. Sleep eluded me that night as excitement and nervousness battled in my mind. The next evening, I prepared the nicest dinner I could manage, setting the table with care and double-checking every detail. When 9 o'clock arrived, the sound of knocking at my door sent my pulse soaring. I approached the door and peered through the peephole, my breath catching in my throat. There she was. Jessica looked even more beautiful in person than in her photos. I opened the door with a wide smile, completely captivated by her presence. Her beauty was so striking that I failed to notice anything else, including the large man who had positioned himself behind her. By the time I realized we weren't alone, it was too late. The man had already drawn a revolver and brought it down hard against the back of my head. The world went dark instantly. When consciousness slowly returned, I found myself lying on my apartment floor, my head throbbing with intense pain. As my vision cleared, the devastating reality became apparent. My television was gone, along with my laptop, gaming console, and sound system. My wallet had been emptied, and my phone was missing. I struggled to my feet, fighting waves of dizziness and nausea. The silence in my apartment felt deafening after the violence I had experienced. With no way to call for help from my own home, I made my way to a neighbor's apartment, my legs unsteady beneath me. The neighbor, an elderly woman I had only spoken to briefly in passing, immediately recognized my distress and welcomed me inside. With trembling hands, I dialed the police from her phone, my voice shaking as I tried to explain what had happened. The officers who responded were professional and thorough, documenting the scene and taking my statement. They explained that this type of crime was unfortunately becoming more common, with criminals using dating apps to identify and target victims. The beautiful photos, the immediate willingness to meet, and the suggestion to meet at a private residence were all red flags I should have recognized. Despite extensive investigation, Jessica was never found. The profile had been fake, likely using stolen photos of an innocent person. The police suspected this was part of a larger operation, with multiple people working together to rob unsuspecting victims who thought they were meeting potential romantic partners. The financial loss was significant, but the emotional impact was far worse. I had to replace my electronics and change all my locks, but rebuilding my sense of security took much longer. For months afterward, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder and questioning the motives of everyone I met. The experience taught me valuable lessons about online safety and the importance of meeting new people in public places, no matter how genuine someone seems online, and regardless of how attractive they appear to be. It's essential to take proper precautions when meeting strangers from the internet. Let's dive into the next disturbing story. After a painful breakup, I was desperate to move on and forget about my ex-boyfriend. The relationship had ended badly, leaving me feeling rejected and eager to prove to myself that I could attract someone new. In my emotional vulnerability, I turned to dating apps, hoping to find a distraction from my heartbreak. Ryan seemed like the perfect antidote to my loneliness. During our video calls, he appeared charming and handsome, with an easy smile that made me feel special. He was attentive and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. After weeks of chatting online, I began to develop real feelings for him. One particularly difficult night, when thoughts of my ex-boyfriend were overwhelming me, Ryan called and suggested we finally meet in person. "Let's go on an adventure," he said with excitement in his voice. He wanted to take me to his office, where we could watch a movie together. Despite the late hour, it was nearly midnight. I agreed, craving the distraction and connection he offered. When Ryan arrived at my college dormitory, my roommate approved of his appearance, commenting that he seemed nice and was quite attractive. Feeling reassured by her assessment, I climbed into his car without hesitation. The drive to his office was pleasant, filled with easy conversation that put me at ease. However, when we arrived at the building, Ryan made an announcement that should have served as a warning. He claimed to have forgotten his keys, but assured me he knew another way to get inside. To my shock, he pulled out a pocket knife and proceeded to pick the lock with practiced ease. The door opened without triggering any security alarms. I tried to rationalize his behavior, telling myself that perhaps he really had forgotten his keys. and this was simply an unusual skill he possessed. The office itself was impressive, well appointed and clearly belonging to a successful business. Ryan seemed comfortable navigating the space, which helped convince me that he was telling the truth about working there. We settled onto a comfortable couch to watch a movie, and initially everything seemed normal. We cuddled together, and I began to relax, thinking that perhaps my initial concerns had been unfounded. However, as the evening progressed and we became more intimate, Ryan's behavior began to change dramatically. His breathing became labored and strange, producing disturbing sounds that were far from romantic, instead of normal expressions of pleasure. He made guttural noises that reminded me of a disturbed character from a psychological thriller. The sounds sent chills down my spine and made me deeply uncomfortable. After we finished being intimate, I lay in the darkened room, trying to process what had just happened. Suddenly, I was blinded by 3 bright flashes. Ryan had taken photographs of me without my permission. While I was in a vulnerable state, when I demanded that he delete the images immediately, he initially refused, claiming it was just a harmless joke. After several tense moments, he appeared to delete the photos, but I could tell from his behavior that he had likely sent them to someone else before removing them from his phone. The violation I felt was overwhelming. Not only had he photographed me without consent, but he had potentially shared those images with others. I should have insisted on leaving immediately, but in my confused state, I gave him another chance. This proved to be a terrible mistake. As we sat together afterward, Ryan claimed he needed to send a quick text to his sister. I watched in horror as he positioned his phone over my body and took another photograph. Once again, he pretended to delete the image, but I knew better. The pattern was clear. He was collecting intimate photos of me and sharing them with unknown recipients. The realization that these images would likely circulate online indefinitely filled me with shame and regret. I quickly got dressed and insisted that Ryan take me back to my dormitory immediately. The drive back was uncomfortable and tense, with Ryan acting as if nothing unusual had happened. When we arrived, I gave him a perfunctory goodbye kiss, already planning to cut all contact with him. True to my decision, I blocked Ryan on all social media platforms and dating apps. However, the damage was already done. The knowledge that intimate photographs of me were circulating somewhere in the digital world created a constant source of anxiety and embarrassment. The experience taught me several crucial lessons about personal safety and the importance of trusting my instincts. When someone's behavior seems unusual or concerning, it's essential to listen to those warning signs rather than rationalizing them away. Additionally, the experience highlighted the permanent nature of digital images and the importance of maintaining boundaries in intimate situations. Let's dive into the next disturbing story. Growing up in a small apartment in Myrtleville, I spent many quiet evenings browsing through dating profiles without much success. Most nights yielded no matches, leaving me feeling increasingly isolated in a town where meeting new people seemed impossible. The dating app had become more of a habit than a genuine, hoped-for connection. One evening, while mindlessly swiping through the usual array of profiles, I encountered someone who immediately captured my attention. Her name was Mary Jane, a name I had always found beautiful and intriguing. Her photos showed a genuinely lovely young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile that seemed to reach out through the screen. To my surprise and delight, we matched immediately. I sent her a message without hesitation, and she responded quickly. For the first couple of hours, our conversation was delightful. She was witty and engaging, asking thoughtful questions about my interests and sharing amusing stories about her own life. I found myself genuinely excited about the possibility of meeting someone special. However, as the night progressed, our conversation took an unexpected and disturbing turn. Mary Jane began talking about death, not in a philosophical or metaphorical sense, but as if it were a personal experience she had recently undergone. She spoke about dying with a matter-of-fact tone that initially made me wonder if she was speaking metaphorically, or perhaps sharing details from a book or movie she had been reading. When I expressed confusion about her comments, she became defensive and accusatory. "You're just like the others," she typed. "You don't believe me. You think I'm crazy." Her messages became increasingly agitated, and she seemed genuinely hurt by my skepticism. "Well, I'll show you," she wrote ominously, before falling silent. I waited for several minutes, hoping she would clarify what she meant, or perhaps apologize for the strange direction our conversation had taken. When no additional messages appeared, I felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Clearly, she was dealing with some serious psychological issues, and I was grateful to avoid what could have been a dangerous situation. Exhausted by the bizarre encounter, I put my phone aside and prepared for bed. However, sleep proved elusive. The strange conversation replayed in my mind, and I found myself analyzing every word she had written, searching for clues about her mental state or intentions. When I finally managed to drift off to sleep, I was awakened sometime later by an unusual sensation. There was pressure on my mattress, as if someone had just sat down on the edge of my bed. The feeling was unmistakable, the slight depression in the mattress, and the subtle shift in weight distribution that occurs when another person joins you on a bed. I opened my eyes slowly, expecting to find that I had been dreaming, or that perhaps my cat had jumped up beside me. Instead, I found myself looking directly at Mary Jane. She was sitting calmly on my bed, exactly as she had appeared in her profile photos. Her expression was serene, almost peaceful, but there was something unsettling about her presence that I couldn't quite identify. Terror filled my body as I realized this was impossible. How could someone from a dating app be sitting in my bedroom? I scrambled backward across the bed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. As I moved away from her, Mary Jane smiled, not a threatening expression, but somehow deeply disturbing in its calmness. Then, as suddenly as she had appeared, she began to fade. Like mist dissipating in morning sunlight, her form became translucent and then disappeared entirely. I was left alone in my room, breathing heavily and questioning my own sanity. Had I been dreaming? Was I experiencing some kind of psychological break brought on by stress or loneliness? Desperate for answers, I grabbed my phone and opened the dating app, searching for Mary Jane's profile. I scrolled through my matches and conversations, but found nothing. There was no record of our lengthy chat, no saved messages, and no profile matching her name or photos. It was as if she had never existed at all. I spent the remainder of the night awake, checking and rechecking the app, searching through every possible menu and filter. No trace of Mary Jane could be found anywhere in the system. The conversation that had seemed so real and vivid had vanished completely, leaving me to wonder if it had ever happened at all. The experience was so unsettling that I immediately deleted the dating app and never reinstalled it. Whether Mary Jane had been a figment of my imagination, a lucid dream, or something more supernatural. I decided that online dating was not worth the psychological distress it had caused. Let's dive into the next disturbing story. At 13 years old, living in Topeka, Kansas, I was eager to explore the world of online dating that my friend Jimmy had enthusiastically recommended. He had been using various dating apps and spoke excitedly about all the interesting people he had met. Inspired by his success, I decided to create my own profile and see what connections I might make. The initial experience was thrilling. Getting matched with people I didn't know felt exciting rather than concerning. I viewed it as an opportunity to expand my social circle and meet interesting individuals from different backgrounds. The possibility of connecting with someone completely new seemed full of potential for friendship and maybe something more. However, one particular match immediately stood out as unusual. Instead of a normal name, this person's profile displayed only a series of ones and zeros, binary code that formed their entire identity on the platform. While I found this odd, I dismissed it as either a creative username choice or perhaps someone who was interested in computer programming. This mysterious user quickly became my most persistent contact. They sent messages throughout the day and night, never seeming to sleep or take breaks from our conversations. Their communication style was unlike any of my other matches. They showed little interest in sharing details about themselves, instead focusing intensely on learning everything about me. Their questions became increasingly personal and specific. They wanted to know where I lived, what school I attended, what my daily routine looked like, and details about my family members. Initially, I attributed this curiosity to normal getting-to-know-you conversation. But the intensity and persistence of their inquiries began to make me uncomfortable. As days passed, the constant stream of messages became overwhelming. My phone buzzed continuously with new messages from this binary-named user, making it difficult to focus on school or spend time with friends. The relentless communication felt more like harassment than friendly conversation. Eventually, I decided to take a break from the dating app entirely. I disabled all notifications and tried to put the strange interactions out of my mind. However, my curiosity about the mysterious user lingered. I decided to investigate their profile more thoroughly, searching for any additional information that might explain their unusual behavior. When I searched for their binary username within the app, I received an error message stating that the user didn't exist. This was impossible. I had been messaging with them for weeks, and our conversation history was still visible in my chat log. How could someone who had been actively communicating with me suddenly have no presence on the platform? Confused and slightly frightened, I tried to message them again, asking directly why their account appeared not to exist according to the app's search function. My message went unanswered, leaving me with more questions than before. I eventually deleted the app, hoping to put the strange experience behind me. One afternoon, while cleaning my room, I was searching for a vintage action figure from the 1980s that I had misplaced. I knew it had to be somewhere in my room, as my parents typically didn't move my belongings, and they were currently away on vacation in Hawaii. As I searched through drawers and under furniture, the missing toy suddenly dropped from above, hitting me directly on the head. I looked up immediately, expecting to see where it had fallen from, but there was nothing above me that could have caused the toy to drop. The ceiling was empty, with no shelves or fixtures that could explain how the object had fallen. The incident was physically impossible, yet undeniably real. Immediately after the toy incident, my phone rang with a notification. Impossible as it seemed, I had received a message from the binary user, despite having deleted the dating app entirely from my device. The message was brief but chilling. "Did you find it?" I screamed and dropped my phone, running from my room and slamming the door behind me. How could I receive a message from an app that was no longer installed on my device? How could this person know about the falling toy incident that had just occurred in the privacy of my own room? For several weeks afterward, nothing unusual happened, and I began to convince myself that the entire experience had been some combination of coincidence and imagination. I avoided reinstalling any dating apps and tried to focus on normal teenage activities. However, my relief was short-lived. One day, I received a text message directly to my phone number, not through any app, but as a regular SMS. The message consisted entirely of binary code, a long string of ones and zeros that meant nothing to me at first glance. Frightened but curious, I decided to research binary translation tools online. I found a website that could convert binary code into readable text and carefully entered the sequence I had received. The translated message sent chills through my entire body. "I'm always watching." The realization that this mysterious entity had somehow obtained my personal phone number and was continuing to monitor my activities was terrifying. The binary code felt like a signature, confirming that the same presence responsible for the dating app messages and the falling toy incident was still actively involved in my life. This final message convinced me never to engage with online dating platforms again. Whether the experience was the result of an elaborate prank, a sophisticated hacker, or something more supernatural, it demonstrated the potential dangers of connecting with strangers through digital platforms where anonymity makes almost anything possible. Let's dive into the next disturbing story. After ending several brief relationships that never seemed to develop into anything meaningful, I found myself in my early 30s, still searching for genuine connection. The men I had dated weren't bad people. We simply lacked compatibility, and nothing ever lasted longer than a month. As dating apps became more popular, I decided to embrace this new technology in hopes of finding someone more suited to my personality. I tried numerous platforms with little success. The few men who matched with me often seemed more obsessive than genuinely interested, their profiles raising red flags that made me uncomfortable. Then I discovered a new app that had gained popularity for its innovative approach to matching people based on mutual interest. After purchasing a premium membership, I began browsing through profiles with renewed optimism. While I rejected more potential matches than I accepted, there were still many promising candidates. One evening, after wearing out my finger from swiping, I received notifications that 3 different men had already matched with me. Among these matches was a 22-year-old named Connor, who immediately caught my attention. He was tall, half-Cuban, and strikingly handsome. His profile indicated he was studying pre-law, which impressed me greatly. I decided to take the initiative and sent him a message, admitting that I was rusty at online dating. Connor responded within minutes, explaining that he had been about to message me as well. My heart fluttered with excitement. I hadn't felt this giddy about meeting someone in years. Our conversations revealed that he came from a struggling background and worked 2 jobs to support his mother while paying his way through college. His determination and family loyalty made him even more attractive to me. After a week of getting to know each other through messages, we decided to meet at a small outdoor concert in the local park. Connor had somehow managed to get the day off from both of his jobs, which seemed almost miraculous given his demanding schedule. I spent extra time preparing for our date, making sure I looked my best while also carrying pepper spray as a precaution. I arrived early and found a spot toward the back of the gathering crowd, leaving room for Connor to sit beside me when he arrived. As the minutes ticked by and the concert began, it became painfully clear that Connor wasn't coming. After waiting for half an hour past our agreed meeting time, I had to accept that I had been stood up. The disappointment was crushing. After years of failed relationships and finally finding someone who seemed perfect, I had allowed myself to hope again, only to be hurt once more. I tried to enjoy the music for another 10 minutes, but my heart wasn't in it. I decided to walk home rather than take public transportation, needing the fresh air and time to process my emotions. My house was about 1.5 miles away, a reasonable distance for an evening stroll. About 15 minutes into my walk, I became aware of footsteps behind me. Glancing back, I noticed a man in a dark hoodie maintaining a consistent distance of about 20 yards. He never got closer, but he never fell further behind either. I kept my hand on the pepper spray in my pocket and continued walking, telling myself that he was probably just another person heading home from the concert. However, as I turned several corners and crossed multiple streets, the man remained behind me at the same distance. With better lighting in some areas, I could see he was approximately 6 feet tall, with a thick build and a full beard. My heart began to race as I realized this couldn't be coincidence. The man was definitely following me, and from his build, I knew it couldn't be Connor. My palms grew sweaty as I considered my options. Going home would lead this potential threat directly to my address, but I needed to get somewhere with other people around. As I analyzed the situation, I made the mistake of becoming too focused on my thoughts and not paying enough attention to my surroundings. Suddenly, I felt a cold, clammy hand clamp over my mouth from behind. An arm wrapped tightly around my neck, cutting off my air supply and causing the veins in my face to bulge with pressure. I screamed as loudly as I could manage and fought back with every ounce of strength I possessed, kicking and struggling against my attacker. Suddenly, we were both knocked to the ground with tremendous force. The impact drove all the air from my lungs, and I felt a sharp pain erupt in my ribs. There was another person involved in the altercation, but with the arms still around my neck, I couldn't see what was happening. The next thing I remembered was waking up in an ambulance, a paramedic examining a large bruise on my side. I had suffered a broken rib during the struggle, but I was alive and safe. Within the hour, I learned that my attacker had been arrested, and that a father walking his daughter home had intervened when he witnessed the assault. The police revealed that my attacker's name was Carl, and he had been using multiple fake profiles on various dating apps to catfish and stalk potential victims. His usual method involved robbery, but they suspected he had been escalating his crimes, and that I might have been selected as a victim for something far worse than theft. The investigation revealed that Connor's profile had been one of Carl's elaborate fabrications. The photos, the story about working 2 jobs and studying law, even the personality I had fallen for, it had all been carefully constructed to lure me into a vulnerable situation. Carl had likely been watching me for days, learning my routines and planning his attack. Despite the trauma, I eventually returned to online dating, though not for several months. I chose to believe that Carl was an anomaly, one dangerous individual among many genuine people looking for connection. However, the experience taught me invaluable lessons about personal safety and the importance of meeting new people in public places. I implemented new safety protocols for all future dates, always meeting in crowded, well-lit public spaces, informing friends of my plans and expected return time, and trusting my instincts when something felt wrong. While I couldn't let fear prevent me from seeking love and companionship, I would never again ignore the warning signs that my subconscious mind was trying to communicate. Let's dive into the next disturbing story. My roommate Eric was an enthusiastic user of dating applications, particularly the most popular swiping app that had revolutionized how people met potential partners. He approached dating with a casual attitude that some might have found concerning, but he was always upfront about his intentions. Eric made it clear to every woman he met that he was only interested in physical relationships, never misleading anyone about his emotional availability or long-term goals. Eric and I shared a dormitory room, which meant I had a front row seat to his dating adventures. He was generally successful in his pursuits, regularly meeting women who were interested in the same casual arrangements he preferred. His approach seemed to work well for everyone involved, and he appeared happy with his lifestyle choice. One evening after classes, Eric seemed particularly excited about a conversation he was having through the dating app. He told me he had connected with a woman who had a female friend, and both were interested in meeting him for what he euphemistically called group activities. I had never seen him so animated about a potential encounter. That weekend, around 7 in the evening, Eric left to meet these two women at a local bar. This was his usual routine: meet in a public place first, get to know the people involved, and then decide whether to continue the evening elsewhere. He typically sent me updates about how his dates were progressing, either letting me know he would be staying out late or that he was heading home. As the hours passed without any communication from Eric, I began to feel concerned. By 2 in the morning, I still hadn't heard a word from him. I tried to convince myself that he was simply having such a good time that he had forgotten to check in, or perhaps he had decided to spend the night at someone else's place and would contact me in the morning. I spent some time playing video games and having a few beers before stepping outside for a cigarette. As I exited our dormitory building, I nearly tripped over something on the front steps. To my shock, it was Eric, sitting alone in the darkness. I asked him how long he had been there, laughing at first because I assumed he had locked himself out or was playing some kind of prank. However, when Eric didn't respond to my question, I sat down beside him and immediately noticed that something was terribly wrong. His eye was blackened and swollen, and tears were streaming down his face. In all the years I had known Eric, I had never seen him cry, not even during the most stressful periods of our college experience. I asked him repeatedly what had happened, but Eric remained completely silent. His usual outgoing personality had been replaced by a hollow, distant demeanor that frightened me more than his physical injuries. After sitting with him for several minutes without getting any response, I helped him inside and tried to convince him to seek medical attention or at least talk about what had occurred. Instead of opening up about his experience, Eric made the decision to leave school temporarily and return to his parents' home. He packed his belongings the next day, telling me only that he needed a break from college life. I was deeply worried about my friend and roommate, but he refused to provide any details about what had happened that night. Eric stayed away for the entire remainder of the semester. When he returned the following term, his appearance shocked me even more than his condition on that terrible night. He looked gaunt and haunted, as if he had aged several years during his time away. It was clear that whatever had happened to him had left lasting psychological scars. I couldn't contain my curiosity and concern any longer. As his best friend, I felt I had a right to know what had traumatized him so severely. That night, as Eric unpacked his belongings in our shared room, I pressed him for answers. Finally, he broke down and agreed to tell me everything, though he warned me that I might not be prepared for what I was about to hear. Eric's account of that night was more horrifying than anything I could have imagined. When he arrived at the bar to meet the two women, the lighting was dim and the atmosphere chaotic, similar to a nightclub environment. Someone wearing a dress approached him and pulled him toward the bathroom, and he naturally assumed it was one of his dates from the app. Once inside the bathroom, however, a man suddenly appeared and shoved Eric violently against the wall. The attacker punched him in the face with enough force to knock him unconscious immediately. When Eric regained consciousness, he discovered that his wallet had been stolen and his clothing was disheveled and torn. More disturbing than the robbery was the physical evidence that Eric had been sexually assaulted while unconscious. He was bleeding and experiencing pain that made it clear what had happened to him during the time he was unconscious. The trauma of this realization, combined with his physical injuries, left him too embarrassed and devastated to report the crime or seek immediate help. Eric's decision to return home was motivated by his need to process this traumatic experience in a safe environment, surrounded by family who could support him through his recovery. However, the worst consequences of that night were yet to be discovered. When Eric went for his routine health screening several months later, he received devastating news. The sexual assault had resulted in Eric contracting HIV, a diagnosis that would change the trajectory of his entire life. The physical healing from his injuries had been relatively straightforward, but this diagnosis meant that he would live with the consequences of that violent night forever. Eric's story serves as a powerful reminder of the potential dangers that exist when meeting strangers from online platforms. While most people using dating apps have legitimate intentions, there are predators who use these platforms to identify and target vulnerable victims. The anonymity and ease of creating false profiles make it possible for dangerous individuals to operate with relative impunity. Let's dive into the next disturbing story. At 16 years old, I was experiencing the typical rebellious urges that come with adolescence. During summer break, when parental supervision was more relaxed and free time seemed endless, I decided to sneak out of the house one evening for what I thought would be a harmless adventure with my friend. I quietly made my way through the small patch of trees that lined the back of our property, which provided a convenient path to the neighboring streets where my friend Kay lived. We had planned to spend the evening in her backyard, drinking beer and talking about the usual topics that occupied teenage minds during those long summer nights. As the evening progressed and we became slightly intoxicated, we stumbled upon a popular dating application that we had heard about but never explored. The app was known for its simple swiping mechanism and had gained considerable attention among people our age, though technically we were too young to be using it legally. Kay didn't want to create her own profile, so I volunteered to set up an account for both of us to share. I was tipsy, but still coherent enough to understand what I was doing. In my slightly impaired state, I made it clear to myself that this was purely for entertainment purposes. We wanted to see what kinds of people were on the platform and perhaps have some laughs at the various profiles we encountered. After creating my profile and beginning to swipe through potential matches, my phone started buzzing with notifications at an alarming rate. The response was immediate and overwhelming, with far more activity than I had anticipated. I set down my half-empty beer bottle and looked at Kay with surprise, commenting that while I knew it was a dating platform, I hadn't expected such an intense reaction to my presence. The constant notifications were becoming distracting, so I decided to turn off my phone and deal with whatever responses I had received later. I told myself that once I got home, I would simply delete both the account and the entire application, treating the whole experience as a brief experiment that had gotten out of hand. I checked the time and realized it was approaching 4 in the morning. I had to babysit some local children the next day, and I definitely didn't want to show up hungover and exhausted. I said goodbye to Kay, promising to update her on any interesting developments from the dating app, and made my way back through the patch of trees to my house. 2 days later, I was babysitting the same children I had been caring for over the past year. There was 5-year-old Sadie, who was an absolute bundle of joy and sunshine, 10-year-old Jacob, and 14-year-old Ashton. It always seemed strange that the family wanted a babysitter when Ashton was only 2 years younger than me, but I enjoyed spending time with all 3 children. We were relaxing in the living room with a movie playing for Sadie, who had fallen asleep on the couch with her sippy cup still in her mouth. I carefully removed the cup without waking her, while Jacob and Ashton sat at the kitchen island, with Jacob playfully bothering his older brother about something I couldn't quite hear. As I joined the boys at the kitchen counter, my phone buzzed with a notification from the dating app. I was surprised because I hadn't received many alerts since that first overwhelming night when I had created the profile. When I opened the notification, I saw that I had received a new match and message. The profile seemed suspicious and potentially fake, but I was still in the mindset of treating this as entertainment rather than serious dating. I thought Kay would find it hilarious if I played along with whoever this person was, so I decided to respond and see what would happen. The person's username was Braxton, though I suspected this wasn't their real name. Their first message immediately sent chills down my spine and made me question whether this was still a harmless game. The message read, "It would be so exciting to feel your pulse escape as I grabbed your neck." I had to read this message multiple times because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The content was so disturbing and violent that I initially thought I had misunderstood something. However, there was no ambiguity in the message. This person was describing what sounded like a desire to harm me physically. My heart seemed to stop beating as I processed the implications of what I had just read. I couldn't think of any reason why someone would send such a morbid and threatening message to a stranger. Jacob and Ashton noticed my reaction immediately, pointing out that I had gasped sharply and that my face had turned red with shock. I told them I was fine and that I had just gotten a sudden headache, not wanting to alarm them with the truth about what I had received. Before I could decide how to respond, another message appeared on my screen that made the situation even more terrifying. The second message simply said, "Is that your family?" This question, combined with the previous threatening message, made it clear that this person might be watching me somehow. How else could they know that there were other people with me, particularly children? A third message followed immediately. "You're all beautiful. You're mine now." The possessive language and the reference to the children I was caring for filled me with absolute terror. This wasn't just some internet troll making random threats. This person seemed to have specific knowledge about my current situation. I immediately asked the person who they were and what they wanted, demanding that they stay away from me and the children. I blocked their profile and reported them to the application administrators, hoping that would be the end of the terrifying interaction. In the days and weeks that followed, I didn't experience any further contact from this person, and no one matching their description appeared at the house or anywhere else I spent time. I tried to convince myself that it had been nothing more than an internet troll who had made lucky guesses about my situation. However, the experience taught me valuable lessons about online safety and the potential dangers of sharing personal information with strangers. Even though I had thought I was being careful by not revealing specific details about myself, somehow this person had been able to determine that I was with other people, particularly children. The incident also made me realize how vulnerable young people can be when using platforms designed for adults. While I had approached the dating app as a harmless experiment, I had inadvertently exposed myself to someone with clearly dangerous intentions.